So, the spoilers are out for My Hero Academia manga chapter 352. It has been 3 long weeks, but the most recent chapter is about to be released. And from what we see with the spoilers, yeah, this may be the potential end of the Todoroki conflict. And you'll see why right now. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Andrew, and I'm here to cover the spoilers for My Hero Academia manga chapter 352. From what we've seen with the spoilers so far, this is going to be a heavily focused chapter on the Todoroki siblings, specifically Shoto and Dabi. We are most likely, from what we see, continuing on from the fight that we saw last chapter and potentially having the fight in this chapter with Shoto giving his brother some very good words that he needed to hear and potentially ending the conflict between them. So let's dive right into the spoilers right now, because this is going to be an amazing chapter. I just know it. So the chapter begins with a flashback of the students in school dorms the night before the war started. Deku is questioning whether Shoto will actually fight his brother, and he says that it is his duty because he's not so sure whether Endeavor will keep his word, and Dabi is a reflection of the Todoroki family's sins. So this is very interesting. For starters, we have the idea that Endeavor isn't going to be keeping his word, meaning that the idea that Endeavor as well as Shoto won't work together to stop Dabi. So Shoto is doing it himself because he really doesn't trust his father to do so, which makes sense because it is Endeavor. He does do a lot of things on his own. But from what we see later on in the text spoilers, we also see that Shoto is showing off his special technique that he developed and makes his chest light up. Deku remembers the training he was doing, and Kaminari starts poking at it, saying that it doesn't burn even if he touches it, but it's hard for Shoto to keep focusing. So this is just a funny thing. But we are actually getting more explanation for the move that we saw last chapter, the Flash Fire Fist Phosphorus. So we're getting a better understanding of how it actually operates, and we have Shoto actually explaining it, because Shoto explains that it consists of applying the properties of Flash Fire Fist to both sides of his body simultaneously, using the heart as the center, making the hot and cold blood circulate throughout his body and come into balance. So the general idea of it is that because he's in perfect balance using his heart, and that he's in this state, that the fire on his chest is apparently unable to be burned, which is weird because, you know, fire is generally the release of energy and the release of heat, but that is not happening with Shoto's flame. So it's very interesting that this is a technique that he specifically made to defeat Dabi, who actually has a resistance to cold and not heat. As we see later on in this text spoilers, that Midoriya says that it's like cold fire, and Shoto begins to get lost in thoughts, saying that his father wanted the perfect son who could use ice to reduce the heat in his body. In fact, he is walking a path in the opposite direction. He himself has found a meaning to his existence, and because of this, he smiles at Deku. That's my power. Thank you. We cut back to the present with Shoto using another attack. Freezing blow, white blade of the frost fire. He says that this way, maybe Dabi can cool his head a little. So we're getting a lot from what we're seeing with these text spoilers. We're getting to see a lot more growth with Shoto and how he's going from what he used to be, which is very unable to be aware of himself, to really just relying on his friends and being encouraged by Deku to pretty much be the person that he is, and how he's still kind of walking the opposite path that Endeavor wanted, but he's still doing his own thing. And we get a new move from him that is more based off both his combination of fire and ice and using it to create cold fire. He's actually using it to make his fire colder, which is very cool, and I wonder why that may be the case, and we can speculate more on that later on. And then we get into the next part of the text spoilers, which are focusing on the actual fighting and the actual combat, as we see that Dabi is apparently thrown backwards by the impact, but shoots pillars of flame from his hands to balance himself upwards. He analyzes the situation, seeing that Shoto has a body strong enough to withstand the heat of his flash fire and produce ice cold enough to overpower his flames. But he doesn't stop for a second and already starts directing all of his heat towards the ground. Shoto realizes that he has lost focus and will need to prepare his attack again, but huge pillars of flame emerge from the ground. Dabi shouts that it's not possible to change the tracks of your life and that they present the limit of superhuman society. The two are destined to follow similar paths. So this is very interesting. We see that he's able to do a lot with his firepower in respect to Dabi, and how he's preaching this ideal that because they are special and that they are perceived to be the peaks of this superhero society, that they should be walking down a similar path, when in reality, they're walking down different paths. And this is something that is actually brought up, not just in the text spoilers, but most likely in this chapter, as we get the results of what Dabi shooting his flames on the ground actually accomplishes. Because with the next part of the text spoilers, we see that the flames start to bend, and we see that the three sidekicks are covered in wounds, most likely from Dabi's fire, but they're doing their best to alleviate the situation. They say they agree with everything Shoto said and fall to the ground, causing him to apologize, and for Burning to repeat what she said earlier, that thanking or apologizing is a waste of energy. Even so, he shouts thank you so much. So from what we got with that part of the text spoilers, most likely than not, these probe heroes are down for the count. They're most likely not dead, but they probably cannot really get involved with the fight anymore, so most likely Shoto has to finish off the fight at this moment. As we get into the next part of the text spoilers, where we see a sequence inside Shoto's head, with him saying that he always thought that he was a lonely existence because of his blood and his past, but after a while he realized that wasn't quite the case, that everyone was much closer than he imagined. We see a panel of many of the students facing him, and many moments they experience together as Shoto concentrates all of his power and remembers Mount Lady's advice during the interview training. And from here, as soon as I read that line of text spoilers, I knew exactly where this chapter was going, as we get the final part of the text spoilers saying that he propels himself forward and stops right next to Dabi, saying that it is possible to change the course of your life, no matter how difficult it may be. Then please stop. Most likely Shoto saying this to Dabi. The next page is a huge sphere of light, Shoto's new technique. He calls it the Great Frozen Tidal Bore, and it is so strong enough to freeze all of the buildings and the trees in the vicinity. On the last page, we see two panels showing Shoto and Toya as children, both crying while the present two are motionless. End of chapter. So there's a lot of implications from what we see at the end of this chapter and then this chapter as a whole. We don't get full confirmation that Shoto was able to save Dabi, but we do get confirmation that he was at the very least able to stop him, which is something that he really wanted to do. And that the way that he did it was with a huge F-off blast of ice, which makes sense for both of these characters to do and withstand. As well as we got to see a lot of beautiful images from what we see with the spoilers, and I can't wait for them to be properly shown for me to really go into a more in-depth review, because there's a lot that you can talk about in this chapter. You could talk about potentially that this fight concludes in this chapter. You could also speculate that there may be more coming after this chapter involving Shoto as well as Dabi. Heck, you could even speculate on how Shoto was able to create these moves that have both the properties of both fire and ice. There's so much that you could really talk about, but I'm not going to really talk about that much in this chapter, in this video, because what I really want to talk about is the spoilers, and I pretty much covered all of the spoilers for this chapter. So let me ask, what did you think of the chapter spoilers for this week? And were you very excited, or do you think that these spoilers matched the hype of the fact that we were gone for 3 weeks? Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below, and don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to see more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!